With the inheritance from my husband Marcus, I bought a farm to finally find some peace. Then my son Andrew called me. "Stay in the garage for a few days, Mom. I'm bringing Kiara's parents and some friends up. If you embarrass us, I'm checking you into an assisted living facility." I didn't say a word, but when they arrived, they were in for a surprise. "I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and let me know what city you're reading from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Dahlia Ellington. I'm 60 years old, and I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would come from my own son. It all started 3 months after Marcus's funeral. My husband of 35 years was gone, and I could still feel the emptiness he'd left in our bed, in the kitchen where we used to have breakfast every morning, in every corner of the house we had built with so much love. The life insurance policy Marcus had kept a secret was a surprise at 500 zalozard. It was a sum we had never had before, enough money to completely change my life. For weeks, the money sat untouched in the bank account while I grieved the loss of the only man who had truly loved me. Marcus had always dreamed of a small farm in the North Georgia countryside, a place where we could raise some animals and grow our own vegetables. When I retire, he'd tell me while stroking my hair, "We'll buy that farm and live right away from all that city noise." But Marcus died before he could retire, before he could fulfill that dream. That's when I decided I would do it for him, for us, for all the years we had spent planning that quiet life on the farm. The farm I found was about 2 hours outside of Atlanta, Georgia, surrounded by green hills and with a small creek running through the property. The main house was modest but solid, with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen overlooking the garden, and a porch where I could picture myself sitting every sunset. There were stalls for horses, even though I had no idea how to care for them, and enough land to plant whatever I wanted. The price was $350,000, leaving me with $150,000 for renovations and initial expenses. I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, trembling with excitement. It was the first important decision I had made without Marcus, but I knew he'd be proud. That very afternoon, unable to contain my joy, I called Andrew, my only child, Mom. His voice sounded surprised. Andrew was 38 and worked as a manager at an insurance company. He and his wife Kiara had lived in the city for 5 years. "Everything's fine, Andrew. Son, I have wonderful news," I said, feeling my heart pound with pure happiness. "I bought a farm, a beautiful farm in the country, just like your father, and I always dreamed." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "You bought what?" His tone had changed completely. It was flat and cold. "A farm, Andrew. It's perfect. It has everything I need, and there's plenty of space for when you and Kyra come to visit. You could stay on weekends. Bring the grandkids when you have them." "Mom, have you lost your mind?" His voice turned harsh, cruel. "What money did you use to buy a farm? Don't tell me you blew Dad's insurance on that stupid thing." I was speechless. Stupid thing. That's what he called the dream his father and I had shared for decades. "Andrew, I thought you'd be happy. It's a beautiful place, and there's enough room for the whole family." "Mom, listen to me closely," he interrupted. And I could hear Kiara talking in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "I have plans for this coming weekend. Kiara wants to bring her parents and some friends up to see the farm." My heart filled with hope. Maybe he'd reacted badly at first, but now he wanted to visit. "How wonderful, son. I'll get the guest rooms ready and cook something special. It's been too long since I've seen Kiara." "No, Mom. Listen to me well, because I'm not going to repeat it." His voice was cold and calculating. "You're going to fix up the garage for yourself. Do you understand? Kiara doesn't want her parents thinking we can't afford a decent vacation spot. If you embarrass us in any way, if you make any comments out of line or act like the pathetic old woman you've become, I'll check you into a nursing home so fast you won't even know how you got there." The words hit me like physical blows. I felt like I couldn't breathe, that the walls of my new kitchen were closing in on me. My own son was asking me to sleep in a garage as if I were some kind of stray animal. "Andrew," I whispered, my voice breaking, "why are you talking to me like this? I'm your mother. You're a burden, Mom. You have been ever since Dad died. Kyra and I had plans for that insurance money. Real plans, not farm fantasies like a 5-year-old kid. But the money, it was Dad's and I'm his son. I had more right to decide what to do with it than you did." I could hear Kyra laughing in the background. "We'll see you Friday night. Have the garage ready and don't make us look bad." He hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there holding the phone to my ear, listening to the dial tone as tears streamed down my cheeks. In my new kitchen, surrounded by unpacked boxes and dreams waiting to be built, I felt lonelier than ever. But amidst that overwhelming sadness, something else began to stir. something that had been dormant for years of being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the woman who always yielded and forgave, a spark of something Marcus had seen in me when we were young, but which I had buried under layers of domesticity and sacrifice. Andre had made a mistake, a very big mistake, because if he wanted to play dirty, he was about to discover that his mother knew that game much better than he could ever imagine. The 3 days following that call were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I was the same Dahlia I'd always been, unpacking boxes, organizing the house, trying to adapt to farm life. But inside, something had changed forever. That night, after Andrew's call, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until dawn, sitting on the porch, looking at the stars and replaying my son's words. A burden. Pathetic old woman. I'll check you into a nursing home. Each phrase was like an open wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. But when the sun rose, a cold determination I hadn't felt in decades had been born with the new day. On Wednesday morning, while cleaning the garage to make it my temporary room, I found an old box the previous owners had left behind. Inside were some unimportant papers and an antique landline telephone that still worked. I plugged it in the garage, thinking I might need it. It was that same day that I overheard the first conversation. I was organizing some old blankets when the main house phone rang. There was an extension in the garage, and by sheer coincidence, I picked up the receiver at the same time someone answered in the house. It was Andra. "Chiara, it's me," my son said, and something in his tone made me stay perfectly still without hanging up. "Did you talk to the old woman?" My daughter-in-law's voice sounded dismissive, bored. "Yeah, I told her to sleep in the garage. She started crying as usual, but she'll obey." Chiara laughed. "Perfect. My parents are going to be impressed with the place. How much did you say it cost?" I told them it cost $500,000, not $350. I want them to think we have more money than we actually do. Smart. And after the weekend? When do we start the plan? My blood ran cold. What plan? Give her 1 more month, Andrew replied. Let her get settled in. Let her feel secure. Then we start the psychological pressure. You know those doctors who declare people mentally incompetent, right? My cousin's a psychiatrist. He'll sign any paper we need for $500. Perfect. Once we declare her incompetent, I, as the only child, will have legal power over all her properties. We'll sell this farm and keep all the money. And what do we do with her? Put her in the cheapest nursing home we can find. Hopefully, she won't last long there. Old people die fast once they're taken out of their environment. Chiara laughed again, a cruel sound that cut through me like a knife. You're diabolical, Andraff. I like it. I learned from the best. My father was too soft on her. I'm not going to make the same mistake. Do you think she suspects anything? My mom is too clueless and sentimental. She still thinks I'm her perfect little boy. I could steal her dentures and she'd find a way to justify it. They hung up, and I stayed seated on the garage floor holding the phone with trembling hands. My own son, my only son, the baby I had carried for 9 months, the child I had stayed up with when he had a fever, the boy I had defended from every teacher and principal who complained about his behavior, that very child was now planning to steal everything I had and lock me away in a home to die alone. But something else was bothering me. Andre had mentioned that he had learned from the best. What did he mean? Marcus had never been cruel to me. Never. That night, I decided to go through the boxes I hadn't unpacked yet. They were mostly Marcus's papers, work documents, old bills, family photos. But at the bottom of one of the boxes, I found something that took my breath away. It was a folder marked Andra, confidential, in Marcus's handwriting. Inside were letters, printed emails, and handwritten notes. With my heart pounding faster and faster, I started reading. The first letter was from Andra, dated 3 years ago. Dad, I urgently need you to lend me $10,000. It's a secure investment. I'll pay you back in 6 months with interest. Mom can't know because you know how she gets about money. Marcus's reply was handwritten on the margin. Andre, this is the 5th time you've asked me for money this year. What is really going on? And don't tell me it's for an investment, because the other 4 times you said the same thing and I never saw a penny back. I kept reading. There were documents showing that Andre had constantly asked Marcus for money over the last 5 years, always with different excuses: job problems, a medical emergency for Chiara, investments that turned out to be scams, hidden gambling debts. In total, Marcus had lent him over $80,000 that Andrew had never repaid. But what hurt the most was finding a letter Marcus had written but never sent. Dahlia, my love, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. There are things about Andre that I never told you because I didn't want to hurt you. Our son is not the man we think he is. He has lied to me, he has stolen from me, and he has manipulated me for years. But the worst of it is that he has threatened me. He told me that if I ever told you the truth about him, he would find a way to hurt you. That's why I kept silent. That's why I let him remain your perfect little boy. But I fear for you, Dahlia. I fear what he will do when I'm no longer here to protect you. Please be careful. Don't trust him. And remember that you were always stronger than you believed." Tears soaked the paper as I read the final lines. Marcus had known all this time who Andrew really was, but he had kept the secret to protect me. At that moment, I heard a car pull up outside. Andrew and Kiara had arrived a day earlier than planned. I quickly put all the documents away and ran to the garage, pretending I had been resting. Through the small window, I watched them enter the house as if it were already theirs, turning on lights, opening cabinets, commenting on what changes they would make when it was officially theirs. But I was no longer the same woman who had cried in this very garage 3 days ago. Now I had information, I had proof, and a plan was beginning to form in my mind. Andre and Kara had come to humiliate me, to treat me like a servant in my own house, to begin the process of destroying my life. What they didn't know was that their perfect victim had vanished forever. On Friday evening, Kiara's parents arrived along with 2 other couples. From my window in the garage, I watched them step out of a black Mercedes-Benz, dressed in expensive clothes and commenting on how picturesque the place was. Kiara greeted them at the front door as if she were the lady of the house, while Andre carried the luggage with a smile I knew too well. The same fake smile he'd used since childhood when he wanted something. I stayed in the garage until Andre came looking for me. "Mom, come out of there. Kiara wants you to prepare dinner for 8 people. His tone was a mix of command and disdain. "And put on something decent. You look like a vagrant." I was wearing the same blue blouse Marcus had given me for our last anniversary. It was one of my favorites, but under Andrew's critical gaze, I suddenly felt small and disheveled. I entered the house I had bought with my own money and headed to the kitchen. The guests were in the living room drinking wine and laughing. I could hear fragments of their conversation. Andre was just telling us about this brilliant investment. Kiara's father, Mr. Clayton, a portly man with a gray mustache, was saying, $500,000 for a property that's already worth $700,000. He has a good eye for business. Kiara laughed, a musical sound she had perfected for these occasions. "My husband is very shrewd. He always finds the best opportunities." They were brazenly lying about the farm's price, inflating it by over $300,000. But I kept quiet, preparing roasted chicken with sides while listening to every word. "And his mother?" asked one of Kiara's friends. "Does she live here with you?" There was an awkward pause before Andrew responded. "My mother is complicated. She hasn't been mentally well since my father died. We're taking care of her, but it's difficult." "Oh, the poor thing," another voice murmured. "That must be so hard on you." "It is." Kiara sighed with false sadness. "But Andre is so patient with her. I don't know if I would have his strength." I stood motionless by the oven, feeling the kitchen's heat was nothing compared to the fury rising in my chest. They were painting me as a senile old woman dependent on their kindness, as if they were the martyrs and I was the burden. When I finished preparing dinner, Andrew came to inspect my work. He tasted the gravy and frowned. "It's too salty. Make it again." "Andrew, the gravy is perfect. I've been making it this way for 30 years, and your father loved it." "My father isn't here anymore, and our guests won't like it." "Make it again and don't contradict me in front of them." I was about to protest when Kiara appeared in the kitchen. She wore a sleek black dress and jewelry that cost more than my car. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Is dinner ready? Our guests are waiting." "Almost," I murmured, starting to make a new batch of gravy. "Good. And Andre told me you've been having trouble remembering things lately." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold as ice. "Is it true you forgot to turn off the stove yesterday?" It was a lie. I had never forgotten to turn off anything, but I could see where this conversation was going. "I didn't forget anything, Kiara." She exchanged a significant look with Andrew. "Well, we all get older. It's natural for the mind to start failing." "My mind is perfectly fine." "Of course, dear." Her smile was condescending. "That's why it's so important to have someone to look after you." During dinner, they treated me like an invisible servant. I served the plates, refilled the wine glasses, and cleaned up spills while they talked as if I didn't exist. But when Andrew started telling the story of how he had convinced his mother to buy the farm, I couldn't stay silent anymore. "Actually," I said from where I was collecting plates, "I decided to buy the farm because it was the dream Marcus and I had shared for decades." The silence at the table was immediate and tense. Andrew glared at me. "Mom, the adults are talking." "I am an adult, Andrew, and this is my house." Kiara nervously cleared her throat. "Of course it's your house, Mrs. Ellington." Andre just meant. I know exactly what Andrea meant. My voice was firmer than it had been in days, just as I know exactly why all of you are here. Kyra's father frowned. Excuse me. Andrea abruptly stood up from his chair. Mom, I think it's time for you to leave. Are you confused? I'm not confused at all. I addressed Kyra's father directly. Your son-in-law told you this farm cost 500 zawonzun, right? The man slowly nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the tension that had seized the room. Interesting, because I have the purchase papers right here, showing I paid $350. I pulled the documents from my apron pocket and placed them on the table. Why do you think Andrea would lie to you about that? Kyra visibly paled. Ellington, I think you're confused about. I also have these here. I continued, pulling out more papers. Documents showing that Andrea borrowed over 80 zalozen from my late husband over the past 5 years. Money he never paid back. Mom, shut up, Andrea yelled, but it was already too late. The guests looked at the documents with expressions of shock and confusion. The festive atmosphere had completely vanished. And the most interesting thing of all, I said, my voice now completely calm and controlled, is that yesterday I overheard a very revealing phone conversation between Andrea and Kyra about their plans to declare me mentally incompetent and sell my property. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking and Andrea's agitated breathing. Kyra attempted a desperate last move. This is exactly what we wanted to avoid. As you can see, she's having one of her episodes. Andrea, maybe we should call the doctor? Episodes? I laughed, a harsh sound I hadn't heard leave my throat in years. You're still going to lie, even now. I pulled out my phone, the same one I had used to record the conversation they had had that very afternoon, planning the details of their scheme. Do you want to hear exactly what they said about me 3 hours ago? Andrea lunged toward me, trying to snatch the phone, but I had already pressed play. His own voice filled the dining room, clear and cruel. The old woman is completely under control. By Monday I'll have the psychiatrist's papers. In 2 weeks, this farm will be ours. Kyra's parents stood up simultaneously, their faces showing a mixture of horror and disgust. The other couples exchanged uncomfortable glances and began to murmur among themselves. Andrea, Mr. Clayton said in a tense voice, I think we need an explanation. But Andrea could no longer maintain his mask of the devoted son. His face had transformed into something I recognized from his childhood, the expression of a child caught in a lie, willing to do anything to get his way. She has no right to anything, he finally exploded. That money should have been mine. I'm her only son, and there it was. The truth he had been hiding behind fake smiles and feigned concern. The truth Marcus had seen but had never told me. My son didn't love me. He never had. He had only seen me as a source of money, and when that source ran dry, I was just an obstacle to be removed. The dining room had become a silent battlefield. The guests remained motionless like statues, witnesses to a family tragedy unfolding before their eyes. Andrea breathed heavily, his fists clenched at his sides, while Kyra desperately tried to find a way out of the situation. Andrea, Mr. Clayton murmured, his voice heavy with disappointment. What does all this mean? My son ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. For a moment, I thought perhaps he would apologize, that he would find some vestige of the conscience I had tried to instill in him for years. But when he looked up, his eyes gleamed with a chilling rage. It means my mother is a manipulative old woman trying to ruin my life. He spat the words out like venom. All of this is a lie. She recorded that conversation out of context. Out of context. I couldn't help but laugh. A rough sound that echoed in the room. Andrea, explain to me in what context it is acceptable to plan to steal everything from your mother and lock her in a nursing home. Kyra rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous, Andrea. Let's go. We don't have to tolerate these accusations. Sit down, Kyra. The voice came from Mr. Clayton. But it wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. The man had been a judge for 30 years before retiring, and his judicial tone had automatically surfaced. I want to hear the rest of that recording. Dad, you don't have to. Kyra began, but he silenced her with a look. I turned up the volume on the phone. Kyra's voice was heard clearly. My cousin can sign the mental incapacity papers for $5,000 and he knows judges who will help us. Mr. Clayton's face hardened like granite. His wife, an elegant woman who hadn't said a word all night, brought a hand to her chest. Your cousin, the psychiatrist. He asked slowly, the one you introduced to us last year. Kyra had lost all color in her face. Dad, I can explain. No. His voice cracked like a whip. There is no explanation for this. But Andrea wasn't going to give up without a fight. He approached me with menacing steps. And for the first time in my life, I felt real fear of my own son. You know what, Mom? You're right. Yes, I planned all of it. And you know why? His voice got higher, shriller. Because you deserve it. Because my whole life has been a burden. Dad and I had to constantly lie to you to protect your feelings. We had to pretend you were important when you were really just nothing. Every word was a slap, but strangely they no longer hurt. It's hard to explain what it feels like when you finally see someone for who they truly are. The Andrew I had loved, the son for whom I had sacrificed so much, had never existed. He was just an illusion I had created to fill the void in my heart. Did Dad know? I asked softly. Of course he knew. He's the one who taught me how to handle you. Give her what she wants to hear, Andre. It's easier than dealing with her dramas. Do you think he really cared about you? He tolerated you because he was too much of a coward to leave you. That lie did hurt because I knew it was exactly that, a lie designed to wound. Marcus had truly loved me. The letters I had found proved it. He had kept silent about Andrew to protect me, not because he didn't love me. Dad loved you, Andrew, I said sadly. That's why he never told me what you really were, because he knew it would crush me. Dad was a sentimental idiot, Andrew yelled, and you're worse. It was then that one of Kyra's friends stood up. He was an older, distinguished man who had been listening silently. Excuse me, he said, turning to me. But you mentioned that you have recordings of this conspiracy. I nodded, still looking at Andra, who was now pacing the room like a caged animal, and documents proving the unreturned loans, all signed by Andra, I confirmed. The man nodded thoughtfully. I'm an attorney specializing in family law. What you have just described constitutes several crimes: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and possibly other charges. Andrew stopped dead in his tracks. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother has enough evidence to file criminal charges against you and your wife. Kiara collapsed into her chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had done. Andrew, you said this wasn't risky. You said it was harmless. Shut up. Andrew screamed at her, but it was too late. Kiara's parents looked at each other, and I could see the exact moment they made their decision. Mrs. Clayton spoke for the first time all night. Kiara, pack your things. Mom, please. I said now. Her voice broke no argument. And when we get home, you're going to explain to me how we raised a daughter capable of something like this. The other guests also began to stand up, clearly uncomfortable and anxious to escape the situation. In a matter of minutes, the house was empty, except for Andra, Kiara, and me. Andre approached me one last time, and I saw in his eyes something that terrified me more than his angers and absolute coldness, as if he had decided I no longer existed to him. This isn't over, he said in a low voice. I'll find a way to take everything from you, I promise. No, Andra. My voice was firmer than it had been in years. This is completely over. I pulled out another set of papers from my apron, documents I had prepared after finding Marcus's letters. These are documents transferring the ownership of this farm into an irrevocable trust. I paused. You are not the beneficiary. In fact, there is a specific clause that excludes you from any inheritance should you attempt to declare me incompetent or manipulate me in any way. Andre snatched the papers from my hands, reading frantically. His face went from shock to comprehension to absolute fury. You can't do this. I'm your son. No, I said with a calmness that surprised even myself. A son doesn't try to destroy his mother. A son doesn't plan to steal everything she owns. A son doesn't threaten to lock her in a nursing home to die alone. Kyra had been reading over Andrew's shoulder. What exactly does this mean? It means, I replied, that when I die, this property and all my remaining money will go to a charity that helps elderly victims of familial abuse. Andrew will not receive a single cent. You vindictive old witch. Andrew threw the papers on the floor. You always knew. You always knew you weren't a good mother. His words bounced off me without causing harm. It was as if I had developed an invisible armor against his cruelty. You're right about one thing, Andra. I wasn't a good mother because a good mother would have set boundaries. A good mother wouldn't have allowed you to turn into this. They headed toward the door, Andre muttering threats and curses, Kyra crying and trying to reason with him. But before leaving, Andre turned one last time. This isn't love, he said with a cruel smile. This is pure hatred. No, Andrew, I replied softly. This is self-love. After they left, I was left alone in my kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and half-finished wine glasses. But for the first time in months, maybe in years, I felt completely at peace. I had lost a son, but I had found something much more valuable, my own dignity. And this time, no one was going to take it away from me. The days following that confrontation were the strangest of my life. It was as if I had woken up from a decades-long dream, a dream in which I had lived for others while losing myself. For the first time in 60 years, I didn't have to worry about anyone's expectations but my own. On Monday morning, while drinking coffee on my porch and watching the sunrise over the hills, I heard a car approaching on the gravel path. My first instinct was panic. Andre had come back to fulfill his threats. But when I recognized the blue car, my heart calmed down. It was the lawyer who had been at the dinner, David Hayes, Kyra's friend who had witnessed the entire confrontation. "Mrs. Ellington," he said as he got out of the car. "I hope I'm not bothering you this early." "Not at all," I replied, inviting him to sit on the porch. "Would you like some coffee?" "I'd love some." He sat in one of the wicker chairs Marcus had bought years ago. "I came because I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened Friday night." I served him coffee in a porcelain cup that had belonged to my mother. "I have a mother who is 75 years old," he said softly, "and what I saw on Friday reminded me how vulnerable older people can be when their own family turns against them." "I'm not vulnerable," I replied automatically, but he smiled. "No, you definitely are not. In fact, I think you're one of the strongest women I've ever met, but that doesn't mean you don't need legal protection." He explained that Andre and Kiara probably wouldn't give up, that they would try to find other ways to invalidate the trust, perhaps claiming I had been manipulated by someone else to sign it. "They can try that, but I have a better idea." His eyes twinkled with what looked like mischief. "How about we preempt their moves?" That same afternoon, David returned with a full team of forensic psychologists who could certify my mental competency, an accountant who would review all my finances to demonstrate that I hadn't been coerced, and a social worker specializing in elder abuse. "This is excessive," I protested as I watched them install a camera in my living room. "Mrs. Ellington," David said patiently, "your son threatened you directly. He said he would find a way to take everything from you. We have to be prepared." He was right, of course. That very night Andrew called. "Mom." His voice was different now, controlled, as if he had been practicing what he was going to say. "I've been thinking about what happened. I think we both said things we didn't really mean." "I meant every word I said, Andre." "Mom, I know you're angry, but we're family. We can fix this." "Fix what exactly? The fact that you planned to rob me, or the fact that you wanted to lock me in a home to die alone?" There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of repentance. "You have 72 hours to reverse that transfer to the trust." "Or what? Or you'll find out what I can really do when I set my mind to something." He hung up before I could answer. David was right. Andre wasn't going to give up. The next day, the attacks began. First, there were phone calls at all hours, Andre alternating between tearful pleas and direct threats. Then came the unexpected visits. He would show up at the door at different times, sometimes alone, sometimes with Kiara, always demanding to talk. "Mom, open the door. I know you're in there." "Mom, this is ridiculous. I'm your son." "Mom, if you don't open this door, I'm calling Adult Protective Services and telling them you've been abandoned here." But I didn't budge. David had advised me not to have direct contact with them, and every visit was being recorded by the security cameras he had installed. On Wednesday, Andre escalated his tactics. He arrived with a man who introduced himself as a doctor and shouted through the door that he had a court order to evaluate my mental state. "Mrs. Ellington," the supposed doctor yelled, "your son is worried about your well-being. We just want to make sure you're okay." I immediately called David. "There is no court order," he assured me after making some calls. "That man isn't even a doctor. He's an actor Andrew hired." On Thursday night, Andrew brought reinforcements. He arrived with Kiara, her parents, and two men I didn't recognize. This time they didn't leave when I didn't open the door. "Mom," Andrew yelled, "these gentlemen are from Adult Protective Services. They're here because we're worried about you." I watched from my bedroom window. The officials wore cheap suits and one of them was smoking a cigarette. Real officials would never have behaved like that. "David," I whispered on the phone. "They're here again. This time they brought people who claim to be from the government. I'm on my way. Do not go out under any circumstances." But Andrew had lost his patience. I heard a loud noise like someone had slammed against the back door, then the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. They had smashed the kitchen window. "Mum," Andrew's voice came from inside the house. "Come out now. We just want to help you." I hid in my bedroom closet, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they could hear it. I listened to their footsteps through the house, opening doors, shouting my name. "We know you're here, Mom. Your car is outside." Then I heard Kara's voice. "Andrew, this is wrong. We're committing breaking and entering." "Shut up. She's my mother, and this is the house that should be mine." The footsteps were getting closer to my bedroom. I was sure they would find me when I heard the sirens. David had called the police. "Police! Everyone out with your hands up!" I heard shouting, running footsteps, doors slamming, then silence. When I finally came out of the closet, I found David waiting for me in the living room, surrounded by police officers. "Are you okay?" he asked, checking me for injuries. "I'm fine. What happened to Andra?" "He's been arrested, breaking and entering property damage harassment." "Kiara too." I sat heavily on my sofa, trembling from the adrenaline. "How did you know they were coming?" "The cameras are connected to my phone. I saw everything that happened." He showed me his cell phone where I could see the recording of Andri smashing the window. This plus all the recordings of the phone threats should be enough to get a permanent restraining order. That night, alone in my house with temporarily repaired windows and new locks, I realized something. Andre had crossed a line from which there was no return. It was no longer just greed or manipulation. It was real violence. My son had become a physical threat to me. But strangely, I didn't feel fear. I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: power. The power to decide my own fate. To protect myself, to say no and have it respected. Andre had come to take everything I had. Instead, he had given me the most valuable gift I could imagine, the opportunity to discover who I truly was when no one else had power over me. And this time, no one was going to take that away. 6 months after Andra's arrest, I woke up on my farm as I had every morning since then, in complete peace. The sun filtered through the new curtains I had bought, cheery curtains with yellow flowers that Marcus would have loved. I no longer lived in a house full of painful memories. Now I lived in a home that was completely mine. The restraining order had been made permanent after the trial. Andre had been sentenced to a year of probation for breaking and entering and harassment. Kiara, surprisingly, had cooperated with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. During the legal process, she had revealed more details about Andre's plans, including his intention to drug me to make it look like I had dementia. I never thought he'd go that far. Kiara had testified through tears. At first, it was just talk about money, but then he became obsessed. He said you had stolen his inheritance. Kiara's parents had completely distanced themselves from the situation. Clayton, the former judge, had come to apologize personally. "We raised our daughter to be better than this," he had told me, sitting on the same porch where everything had begun. "You are not responsible for Kiara's choices, just as I am not responsible for Andre's," I replied. It had been a healing conversation for both of us. This particular morning was special. It was the first anniversary of the farm's purchase, and I had decided to celebrate it in a way Marcus would have approved of. David arrived early as promised. In recent months, he had become not only my attorney, but a genuine friend. He brought with him a woman named Sarah Jenkins, the director of an organization that helped victims of family abuse. "Dahlia," Sarah said as she surveyed my property, "this is perfect." During the months of emotional recovery, I had been thinking about what to do with the rest of my life. I was 60 years old in good health and had more money than I needed to live comfortably. But more importantly, I had experience in something no one wants to have. I knew what it was like to be betrayed by your own family. "Are you sure this will work?" I asked as we walked toward the stables I had converted into small cottages. "It will work," Sarah assured me. "There are many older women in similar situations to yours, women who need a safe place to rebuild their lives." I had decided to convert my farm into a temporary refuge for elderly women who had been victims of abuse or family abandonment. It wasn't a large institution or a complex organization. It was simply a place where women like me could find peace, security, and time to heal. The first 3 residents arrived that afternoon. Margaret was 68 and had been thrown out of her house by her son after he got married. My daughter-in-law said I was a burden, she told me as I showed her to her cottage. 40 years living in that house, and they threw me out like a dog. Elaine, 72, had been a victim of financial abuse by her grandchildren. "They used my credit card to buy a car," she explained. "When I confronted them, they said I was senile and didn't remember giving them permission." Rose, the youngest of the group at 59, had escaped a situation where her daughter had been drugging her to control her behavior. "I thought I was going crazy," she sobbed, "until my neighbor saw my daughter putting something in my food." Listening to their stories, I realized that Andre was not an isolated case. Elder abuse by family members was more common than I had imagined. But I also realized something more important. None of us had to accept it. "This is a place where you can take all the time you need," I told them during our first dinner together. "There is no rush, no pressure, only healing." David had structured everything legally so that the refuge was self-sufficient. The trust I had established provided funds for the property's maintenance and a small stipend for each resident. It wasn't charity, it was justice. The first months were challenging. Margaret suffered from panic attacks, Elaine had developed a deep distrust of all banks and legal documents, and Rose had constant nightmares. But slowly, with patience and mutual support, we began to heal together. Margaret discovered she had a talent for gardening and turned a vacant plot into a thriving vegetable patch. Elaine, who had been an accountant before retiring, took charge of the refuge's finances with a meticulousness that impressed me. Rose, who had been a teacher, started teaching literacy classes in the nearby town. Each of them found her purpose again. I found mine too. One autumn afternoon, while sitting on my porch watching Margaret work in the garden, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Ellington. The voice belonged to a young, nervous social worker named Patricia Wilson. "My name is Patricia. I'm a social worker from General Hospital. We have a 75-year-old woman here who was beaten by her grandson. We were given your number as a possible refuge." "Of course," I replied immediately. "When can you bring her?" "This afternoon. She has nowhere to go, and the grandson is still threatening her. We'll be waiting for her." That night, as I helped the newest resident, a fragile woman named Carmen, settle into her cottage, I thought about the road I had traveled. A year ago, I was a 60-year-old woman who had lost her husband and believed her only purpose was to be a good mother to a son who didn't love her. Now, I was the director of a refuge that had helped 8 women rebuild their lives. I was a woman who woke up every morning with a clear purpose. I was someone who had found strength in places I never knew existed. 3 weeks later, David arrived with news. "Andrew wants to see you," he said while we were having coffee in the kitchen. "Why?" "He says he wants to apologize. His probation officer says he's been attending therapy and seems genuinely remorseful." I considered the possibility for a moment. A part of me, the part that had been a mother for 38 years, felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Andrew had truly changed. Maybe he had learned from his mistakes. But then I thought of Margaret, Elaine, Rose, Carmen, and all the other women who had passed through my refuge with similar stories. I thought of the excuses they had heard, the empty promises of change, the second chances that had turned into new opportunities for abuse. "No," I finally said. "I don't want to see him? Are you sure?" "Perhaps, David." I interrupted him softly. "I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconnecting with the person who hurt you. I've forgiven Andrew in my heart, but that doesn't mean I have to allow him back into my life." He nodded, understanding. "Do you want me to relay a message to him?" "Yes. Tell him that I hope he finds peace and healing, but that he will find it without me." That night, I sat on my porch as I did every sunset, watching the lights turn on in the cottages where my residents were preparing dinner, reading books, or simply enjoying the silence that comes with security. My phone vibrated with a text message from Elaine. "Thank you for giving us a home where we can be ourselves again." I smiled, putting the phone back in my pocket. Marcus had dreamed of a farm where we could live in peace. I had created something better, a place where women who had lost their peace could find it again. Andrew had tried to take everything from me, my money, my house, my dignity, my freedom. Instead, he had given me the most valuable gift I could imagine, the opportunity to discover who I really was when no one else had power over me. I had lost a son, but I had found a family, a chosen family, a family built not with blood, but with real love. And for the first time in 60 years, I was completely free. Did you like my story? And which city are you reading from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.